I'll show you my vault. And if you're banked...
In 1945, Jack Benny created the most famous vault in radio history. It was all pretend, just sound effects and jokes about being stingy. But Jack had a real vault, too, one that stayed locked for 50 years after his death. Inside were audio reels labeled "Do Not Open." When researchers finally played them, they heard Jack's voice confessing things that could have destroyed his career. The recordings reveal why he really left vaudeville, and the truth about what happened during those missing war years. He was born Benjamin Kubelski on February 14, 1894, but his mother had already made that choice months before. Emma Sachs was pregnant in Waukegan, but she traveled all the way to Chicago just to give birth there. She believed that a big city birth certificate would help her son's future as a world-class violinist. She didn't want her baby boy to be from a small town. She wanted him to be someone important. She was frail in body, but sharp in mind. And she had already decided her son would grow up playing the violin for packed concert halls. His father, Meyer, had a different kind of story. He came from Poland, started off peddling goods on Chicago streets, and slowly worked his way up until he opened a saloon. He didn't think much of show business and thought it was a poor choice for any respectable Jewish family. But Emma had the louder voice in that marriage. From the moment Benjamin could hold an instrument, she was shaping him. By the time he was 3, they'd moved back to Waukegan and settled in a little house on South Genesee Street. From their front window, Benjamin could see Lake Michigan, and that became a problem. He was supposed to be practicing his violin for 2 hours every day, but he kept looking out at the lake instead. Meyer kept his saloon going and eventually opened a haberdashery, while Emma kept pushing the music. When Florence was born in 1900, Benjamin became a protective big brother, but his days were still spent with the violin. On his 6th birthday that year, he got a half-size violin as a gift, and lessons began immediately with Professor Harlow, who charged 50 cents twice a week. Benjamin was good. So good. People started calling him a prodigy. He was taken to Chicago often to study under Hugo Kortschak at the musical college, but he hated practicing. His mother sat at the piano and accompanied him, saying, "You can do it better," over and over while he barely moved his bow. The people of Waukegan believed in him so much, they raised money to send him to Europe to study. He shocked them all by turning the offer down. He was already slipping away from that path. At school, he was failing everything. He pulled pranks. He skipped class. The most legendary one happened in winter, when he smeared Limburger cheese behind the classroom radiator. When it melted, the whole school had to close down. He was expelled during his freshman year, and the principal told him he could come back if he changed, but he never did. By then, Benjamin had already found a job playing violin in the pit orchestra of the Barrison Theater. While his classmates studied math, he was playing for live shows. The real education came from his father's saloon. It was full of traveling performers and loud personalities. That was where he learned what got laughs and what didn't. One night in 1911, the Marx Brothers came to town, and their mother, Minnie, saw young Benjamin play. She offered him $7.50 a week, with room and board, to tour with them, but his parents refused. They said it would corrupt him. That could have changed his life, but they slammed the door shut. That same year, 17-year-old Benjamin made a big decision. He dropped out of school for good and joined a vaudeville act with 43-year-old widow Cora Salisbury. She promised his parents she'd keep him safe from stage door girls and bad influences. They traveled non-stop, performing 4 shows a day in dusty theaters across the Midwest. Their act was called From Grand Opera to Ragtime, and Benjamin earned $7.50 a week. It wasn't much, but it was the beginning. Then, in 1912, everything nearly collapsed. The famous violinist Jan Kubelik sent lawyers threatening to sue him over their similar names. Terrified, Benjamin changed his stage name to Ben K. Benny. But that didn't solve things. A few years later, another performer, Ben Burney, came after him too. That led to the name Jack Benny, a name that came partly from fellow sailors calling each other Jack, and partly from a lucky dinner with comedian Benny Rubin. By 1921, the name stuck. After Cora left the act in 1914 to care for her mother, Jack teamed up with pianist Lyman Woods. Their act earned $350 to $400 a week by 1916, a huge amount for the time. They played classy theaters from Boston to San Francisco, blending serious music with silly faces and comic timing. But in 1917, everything fell apart when they played the Palace Theater in New York. It was the biggest stage in vaudeville, and they bombed. Their act followed an animal routine, and the audience didn't care. The partnership ended, and Jack enlisted in the Navy. At age 23, Jack was drafted during World War I and assigned to Great Lakes Naval Training Center. He played violin for ceremonies and events at first, but one night changed everything. During a talent show, he played The Rosary, and the crowd started booing. Fellow sailor Pat O'Brien shouted for him to tell a joke. Jack made one quick remark, and the whole place erupted with laughter. That was the moment. That was when the comedian was born. He began performing regularly in the Great Lakes Review, playing a clumsy character named Izzy. He performed for crowds of up to 5,000 sailors. He discovered timing. He discovered charm. And he discovered that he could get more applause with a single joke than with an hour of music. After the war ended in 1918, he held on to that character. America was tired, broke, and still dealing with food rations. So Jack Benny leaned into the stingy, penny-pinching persona he'd developed during the Navy. He started a solo act called Fiddle Funology, combining violin playing with jokes about being cheap. He made fun of himself. He pulled fake money out of his coat. Audiences loved it. The timing couldn't have been better. People laughed because they related to it. He wasn't mocking them. He was one of them. He returned to the vaudeville circuit with Lyman Woods and made even more money. They reinvented their act, mixing stand-up with music, and booking second-billed spots all over the country. They played in top Chicago theaters and major cities. But the big moment, the Palace in New York, had already passed, and that failure stayed with him. Still, Jack kept pushing. He trimmed down the violin, he sharpened the jokes, and with a name that finally belonged to him, he slowly became something new. Not a failed musician, not a side act, but a man who could stand in front of thousands, barely move his face, say one line, and leave everyone doubled over. By the time Jack Benny made it to Broadway in 1924, he was already 30 and had been on the road for over a decade. He wasn't a stranger to the stage, but this was different. Benny's Follies wasn't just another vaudeville act. It was his chance to finally do something new. He stood under the bright lights holding his violin, but this time, he wasn't trying to impress anyone with his skill. He deliberately played just a little badly, enough to make people laugh, even though he'd started playing at age 6 and could actually perform beautifully. That mix, dry sarcasm, a little music, and a lot of confidence, was something Broadway hadn't quite seen before. The New York Times called it fresh. And after years of bouncing between names like Benjamin Kubelski and Ben K. Benny, he had finally settled on Jack Benny. It stuck, and it worked. 2 years later, in 1926, he took a risk in a show called The Great Temptations. It was bold, edgy, even a little scandalous. He played a wisecracking violinist again, but this time he started ad-libbing. Sketches that were supposed to run 5 minutes stretched into 15. Crowds loved it. Producers didn't. They begged him to stick to the script, to keep the show on schedule. But Benny didn't care. His contract gave him creative control. and he used it. The arguments backstage got so bad, the company threatened to replace him. But he didn't stop. He couldn't. And maybe that's when Broadway started to realize Jack Benny wasn't like the others. He wasn't just performing. He was reshaping the rules. That same year, something unexpected happened. Jack met Sadie Marks. Technically, it wasn't their first meeting. Back around 1919 or 1920, when Jack was about 30, he'd been invited to a family Passover dinner in Vancouver by Zeppo Marks. A 14-year-old girl named Sadie was there and completely starstruck. She played a violin piece for him, trying to impress him. He didn't even stay to listen. He asked Zeppo to help him sneak out. She heard him. And the next night, when he took the stage at the Orpheum Theater, she sat in the front row with her friends and stared straight ahead. Not one smile, not one laugh. She got her revenge. They didn't meet again until 1925 or 1926, when she was 20 and working at the May Company in downtown Los Angeles selling lingerie. Jack came in and bought so much ladies' hosiery that she set a store record. He came back every day. He called her constantly when he was on tour. This wasn't some whirlwind fling. It was awkward and slow and weird, and somehow it worked. In 1927, Jack Benny got a starring role in Artists and Models. This was the peak of his Broadway career. He earned $1,500 a week, which would be about $25,000 today. It was more than money. It was validation. He was doing something that clicked. He'd walk on stage, set up a beautiful classical piece, then destroy it with awful violin playing on purpose. The audience roared. He used long pauses, fake frustration, and perfectly timed sarcasm. The smart ones in the crowd knew how skilled he actually was. But he'd rather get laughs than applause. He turned his own failure into an art form. And it was working. That same year, while Jack was making people laugh, he also got hit with something that nearly killed his career. A theater manager accused him of underpaying orchestra musicians. Suddenly, the rumors weren't about jokes or talent. They were about money. The musicians' union got involved. There were threats of blacklisting. Theater owners started canceling his shows. It was bad. Jack had to pay settlements and apologize just to keep working. But the damage stuck. People started whispering that Jack Benny was cheap, that he'd stiff musicians just to save a buck. And years later, when he leaned into the cheapskate character on radio, nobody forgot. It wasn't just an act. It was something rooted in real scandal. Still, not everything that year was disaster. On January 14, 1927, Jack married Sadie, now going by Mary Livingstone, at the Clayton Hotel in Waukegan, Illinois. During the ceremony, when it came time for Jack to stomp the glass, something unexpected happened. It wasn't Jack who fainted. It was Mary. She collapsed right there in front of everyone. But when she woke up, she found roses. Jack had already been sending her one red rose every day. After the wedding, she assumed they'd stop. They didn't. He kept sending her one single red rose every single day, until the day he died in 1974, 48 years. One rose every day. In 1934, they adopted a 2-week-old baby girl named Joan. Jack looked at her and said, "How can you want to adopt a funny-looking thing like that one?" But they brought her home. By then, Mary had already convinced Jack to move into radio. Vaudeville was fading. Touring was hard. Radio meant stability. And she was right. They got rich. When Joan got married at 19, the wedding cost $25,000. Her gown was designed in France. Flowers were shipped from Holland. The reception was held at the Beverly Hills Hotel. It was one of the most lavish weddings Hollywood had ever seen. Jack's radio break came in 1932 with the Canada Dry program. It launched on May 2nd, and by the end of the week, 40 million people were listening. But it didn't click at first. Jack was still trying to mix music and jokes. He played his violin seriously, thinking it would impress listeners. It didn't. The ratings were low. Nobody cared. Then something clicked. He stopped trying to impress. He made the violin bad on purpose. He let other people joke about him. He made himself the punchline. And suddenly, the audience loved it. In 1933, he moved to CBS. He was 39 years old, but instead of aging, he just froze the number. From then on, he was always 39. He said there was nothing funny about turning 40. That year, he introduced the vault gag, a ridiculous underground fortress filled with booby traps, security alarms, even a guard who'd been locked inside since the Civil War. It was absurd, it was theatrical, and it was a hit. People believed in that vault like it was real. By 1936, the cast was forming. Don Wilson came in with his booming voice. Phil Harris showed up with his southern charm, calling Jack Jackson, and stealing scenes with just a line or two. And then came Eddie Anderson, Rochester. He was the first black man to have a regular role on national radio. He didn't just serve Jack on the show, he outsmarted him. He got the last word. He broke barriers every time he spoke. And when southern stations tried to ban episodes featuring Rochester, Jack refused to perform without him. From 1937 to 1945, Jack Benny ruled radio. His show was always in the top 3. In 1944, he signed a contract worth $25,000 a week. That's over $400,000 in today's money. He earned about $3 million a year. But the man who joked about being stingy wasn't always cheap. During World War II, he gave away 10% of his radio earnings to war bonds. He traveled 32,000 miles with the USO, performing for over 3 million troops. He didn't just bring the vault on tour. He brought laughter to people who desperately needed it. The vault made its official debut on January 7, 1945. The alarm blared, doors creaked. Ed the guard stood waiting. The whole thing played out in people's minds with nothing but sound. It became more than a joke. It was a symbol. In 1946, Ronald Colman appeared on the show. So did Leo Durocher. The vault became a clubhouse for the rich and famous. Even though it was fictional, fans wrote letters asking Jack to open the vault for charity. They believed in it because it was part of something bigger. It was about security. It was about saving. It was about surviving hard times with a laugh. By 1948, Jack had turned the vault into a Christmas tradition. On December 19th, in one of the most popular holiday specials ever broadcast, he gave a gift to Don Wilson, changed his mind, and returned it, all while hiding the real math in the vault. The bit worked because it felt familiar. It made thriftiness funny, not mean. And as Americans started spending more after the war, they still tuned in to hear Jack Benny pinch pennies. In real life, the IRS wasn't laughing. Jack made $375,000 a year, but claimed just $19 in entertainment expenses. In one episode, he took Jimmy and Gloria Stewart to dinner, made them pay, then claimed the cost of dry cleaning his suit after she spilled salad on him. But instead of running from the audits, he put them on the show. He made them part of the joke. In 1929, Jack Benny thought he'd finally made it. MGM had cast him in the Hollywood Review of 1929, a 2-hour musical that featured almost every star the studio had. The film made $1 million in profit and was even nominated for Best Picture. But Benny's performance was stiff, wooden, and awkward. His violin playing felt forced. His timing didn't land. MGM had just signed him to a 5-year contract after his agent pushed for it. But after his next film, Chasing Rainbows, bombed, they quietly dropped him. Within months, he was back on Broadway, humiliated. That first film role didn't just flop. It shaped how people saw him. Studios started thinking of him as nervous, unsure, and hard to cast. That single stumble in 1929 stayed with him for years. By 1935, he had another shot with Broadway Melody of 1936, a big-budget film with $1 million investment. Benny played a rival Broadway producer and started ad-libbing lines that actually improved the script. But his director, Roy Del Ruth, hated it. He wanted Benny to stick to the script word for word. They argued so often that crew members remembered shouting matches that lasted hours. Benny thought timing had to be natural. Del Ruth thought he was just being difficult. Even though the film made nearly $2.9 million and got a Best Picture nomination, Benny walked away with a reputation as someone directors didn't want to work with. That label stuck almost as firmly as the one from his first film. Then came 1937. Jack was vacationing in Cannes with Mary Livingstone when he met a man calling himself Albert Chapereau, who claimed he was a Nicaraguan diplomat. He offered to smuggle $2,131 worth of jewelry for Mary past customs using his diplomatic immunity. Benny trusted him. He didn't know the man's real name was Nathan Shapiro, and that he was a con artist who'd already served time in Leavenworth. When Benny arrived back in New York on August 30th, the scam unraveled. Chapereau had hidden the jewelry on himself. His maid Rosa Weber turned him in after he made anti-Nazi remarks. Jack found himself in front of Judge Vincent L. Liebel in 1939, fined $10,000 with a suspended one-year prison sentence. The judge told him, "You must feel very much ashamed of yourself." And Benny could barely whisper, "I do." George Burns got caught up in it too. He had bought a $4,085 diamond bracelet from Chapereau for his wife Gracie to hide childhood burn scars on her arm. Burns was fined $8,000. Legal fees pushed his total to $17,770. Both men could have seen their careers crumble, but instead, they turned it into comedy. They joked about their criminal records and expensive mistakes on their radio shows. Burns even joked about having to report to a probation officer. The public loved it. Sponsors didn't drop them. In fact, their popularity soared. Rosa Weber, the maid who exposed the scam, was rewarded with $6,214 by the government. Jack kept trying to make movies work. In 1945, he starred in The Hornblows at Midnight, a fantasy about an angel ordered to destroy Earth. Warner Brothers had invested $1.8 million into it, but the timing was tragic. Just 8 days before the film opened, President Franklin D. Roosevelt died. The nation was mourning. A comedy about ending the world was the last thing anyone wanted. The film made only $970,000 and lost $861,000. Critics called it overworked and pointless. But Jack didn't run from the disaster. He made it a running joke for the next 20 years on his shows. His self-deprecating humor made the film flop more famous than it ever could have been as a hit. In 1950, Benny finally tried something new: television. On October 28th, his CBS debut aired with only 4 shows planned for the first season. He still had his radio contract and wasn't sure how he'd look at age 56 on screen. He even joked in his first monologue about killing himself if the show failed. But it didn't fail. It exploded. By 1952, 20 million people were watching each week. Lucky Strike paid millions in sponsorship. By 1960, the show went weekly, and Benny became one of the biggest names in TV. He used that platform to try new things. In 1954, future President Ronald Reagan appeared in a vault sketch. It was unusual back then to mix guests into a running storyline, but Benny did it. He also welcomed young comedians. On November 20th, 1955, Johnny Carson appeared, and Benny told him, "Keep improving. It won't be long before you'll have your picture on TV Guide." Carson never forgot it. He adopted Benny's expressions, timing, and humor. Years later, he became the longest-running late-night host in history. Jack Benny kept working through the 1960s. His final season on NBC from 1964 to 1965 pushed the vault sketches even further, turning them into Cold War satire. The vault had flamethrowers, alligator moats, even guard plants named Irving. These jokes were layered with commentary about America's obsession with security. Carson kept visiting the set, Their bond grew stronger as Benny passed on every technique he'd learned. When the show ended on April 16, 1965, the Smothers Brothers refused to follow his style, and it created real tension on air. NBC knew they were broadcasting the end of something historic and paid premium to do it. After retirement, Benny didn't vanish. He made guest appearances that spoke to the times. In 1965, he hosted a special with Bob Hope and the Beach Boys. He used his vault jokes to talk about thrift during the Vietnam War. CBS paid him top dollar just for one-night shows. Even in his 70s, he was one of the highest-paid comedians in America. But behind all the jokes was something he never talked about. From 1950 to 1964, he promoted Lucky Strike cigarettes. For 15 years, he sold the product that would kill him. In October 1974, he canceled a performance after feeling dizzy. In December, doctors discovered he had pancreatic cancer. It was inoperable. He had only weeks. He kept filming right up until the end. On December 26, 1974, Jack Benny died at age 80. His final visitors included George Burns, Frank Sinatra, Bob Hope, and Johnny Carson. And then something unexpected happened. When his will was made public, it revealed a $552,000 fortune, worth $35 million today. He owned a rare 1729 Stradivarius violin valued at $46,000. His Beverly Hills mansion sat across from the Playboy Mansion and sold for $3 million in 1985. The man everyone thought was cheap had been secretly generous for decades. On October 5, 1961, when his hometown renamed a junior high after him, he started $39 trust funds for every baby born in the city that day. He donated quietly to orchestras, youth programs, and charity funds. His stingy character had been an act. The real Jack Benny gave without telling anyone. He changed comedy forever. Jerry Seinfeld, Larry David, Gary Shandling all followed his model. A show about nothing. A character who plays himself. Running gags, ensemble casts, awkward pauses. Jack did it all first. His show mixed real life with fiction, broke the fourth wall, and showed how comedy could be subtle, slow, and clever. His 3 stars on the Walk of Fame, one for film, one for radio, one for TV, mark a career that lasted 63 years. After his death, letters came out showing something else, too. He had supported civil rights efforts in secret. He funded Eddie Anderson's family, Rochester, his loyal TV partner. In 1962, Anderson was listed by Ebony magazine as one of the 100 wealthiest African Americans. When Anderson died in 1977, his home became the Rochester House, a shelter and rehab center. Their 3 films together between 1940 and 1941 had proved that black stars could draw big Southern audiences, even when Hollywood said otherwise. And now, in 2025, something strange has happened. Jack Benny's old radio scripts are being digitized and released in the Radio Vault podcast series, Lost Episodes, wartime jokes that were too edgy back then. His January 7, 1945 episode aired again. Even today, people are hearing his vault open for the first time. His timing still works. The jokes still land. And the more we uncover, the more we see the man behind the myth.